Good evening, everybody. I appreciate you coming out on this rainy night, even if it's on Zoom. We are very fortunate today to have writing coach and owner of the Learning Den, Laura Sokol, who will give us new, fresh ideas on how to get jobs. In the meantime, I want to encourage you to put yes in the chat if you are willing to get targeted emails. And if you've already told me, don't worry about it. So we are really excited that you came. Thank you. And Laura, take it away.
Well, hello. Good evening. I'm so glad you're all here. It means that you have a hunger to better your skills and look for a job. I don't know specifically what each one of your situation is, but I can assure you that I have been in that boat multiple times where I'm looking to shift directions or for new opportunity or something exciting. And that's where storytelling comes in. I am going to share my screen so that you guys can see my little, hang on. No, that's my email. You don't want to see my email. Why is that happening? Sorry.
And I'll see how I ask questions of these.
All right. So here I am. I'm going to do my slideshow there. So I was looking over this before we came. I can't, is this all blocking it? I'm sorry.
I think it's okay. If anyone is able to see it, just put it in chat and we'll play with it. And Laura, are these slides going to be available afterwards?
If you want them to be, sure. I don't know if it would be of interest, but absolutely, I could share this with you.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Go ahead.
First, so this is the importance of storytelling in the interview. You are constantly telling your own story. It's really important that your story is engaging and that your story actually represents you in a way that is professional and gets you the job. I always say, remember, they already know you're already there. They're already interested in you. So now all you have to do is land the job. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about what storytelling is, maybe what it isn't, why it's important, what makes a good story, and we're going to template some stories. We're going to do some interview questions. We're going to do 5 minutes to think and write. And then we're going to do some pivoting. We're going to ask some questions and we're going to pivot to our stories. And then any questions or comments or concerns that you have, I'll open the floor to you. Get rid of this. So, what is storytelling in an interview? This is, it says, a concise anecdote that illustrates your best traits in action. Why is it important? Because it shows you what shows them what you're going to look like in their environment. They're trying to picture you in their office or in their school or in their store or wherever it is that you're trying to gain employment. So you're trying to help them thread that needle. And then it gives you an opportunity to say at the end, and this is what I hope to do for you. So you tell your story. At my previous job, I discovered a cure for COVID, and this is what I hope to do for you. You want to constantly be threading that needle. Keep them there, keep them on the hook. So let's talk about what stories can and can't be. What are the elements of a good interview story? What do you think? I'm going to put this out to you. You could unmute yourself, or you could share ideas in the chat. What do you think makes a good interview story?
And just unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I'm
going to add stuff. So I'm going to start it off by saying humor.
Okay, we have somebody.
Go ahead.
Would one that is more engaging and, you know, attention grabbing, you know, something that grabs their attention.
Yeah, you need that hook, right?
Right.
You want to say
And as,
something
of course,
that's
humor don't hurt either, just to break the ice. You want to,
right.
you want to be serious, but also at the same time, there's nothing wrong with having a little humor as
Right.
well with it. But I would
Right.
say just, attention, grab their attention, more engaging, more
Mhm.
inviting, interesting, all of that, would be great if you can. Something like that.
You want to inform them. You want there to be some information.
Mm-hmm.
There's has to be a point to what you're talking about. Anything else? Any other ideas of what would go into a good story? What makes for a good story when you're reading a book? What do you like about what keeps you turning pages? When someone says it's a page turner, what does that mean?
Something that's more intriguing, book that has intrigue in it, mhm.
Little element of surprise, right? They've got
Right.
your resume. They've
Mhm.
seen what you've done. So you want to shock them, not shock, you want to surprise them a little bit, wake them up, have them get their antennas up, thinking, what was that about?
Laura,
Yes.
I'm curious, would it all be part of your professional career, or is it personal as well?
I typically do 2 professional and 1 personal. And when I talk about 1 personal story, it's always apropos a professional experience. So if I'm giving you a personal story, it might be about conflict resolution, but between me and a neighbor or my children. I'm always thinking about what do I want them to know? And that's what this slide is. It's exactly this point. What do I want them to, what do I want to highlight on my resume? What do I want to make sure they did not miss on my resume? What skills do I want them to know? And then how do I craft 3 stories? And I always go back to that magic number 3. What are 3 stories that I can tell that highlight those 3 things? So
Nice.
it might be a personal story. It might be a professional story. They're not hiring you to entertain them in the office. I always have to tell myself that because I'm very funny in person, but no one's hiring me because I'm going to be a clown show at the coffee maker. People are hiring you because you're competent, because you're easy to work with, because you're going to get the job done. They have a problem, you're going to solve it. You're going to give them examples of how you've solved similar problems elsewhere. And then everything ends with, and this is what I hope to do for you. And you might not literally say, and this is what I hope to do for you, but that's sort of the mantra in your head should be, and this is what I hope to do for you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So here's the template that I use when I'm creating my stories for an interview, when I'm preparing for an interview. It's the white ones. The stuff underneath are actually my answers. So what experience do I want to highlight from my resume? And these are the 3 questions that we were just looking at on the last slide, right? So one thing that I love, I work into almost every conversation I have, is that I lived on the Navajo reservation and I taught 5th grade. And the Navajo reservation is as large as West Virginia, and the community where I lived was right in the middle of the reservation. So it was about 3 to 4 hours in any direction to get off the reservation, to get a haircut, to go to the supermarket, to get to an airport, anything that I ever needed. I was really remote. So this is one of my go-to experiences. Now, why is it that I want them to know that? What does that tell someone about me? Think for a sec, like, what do they learn about me when I tell them that I have teaching experience on a Navajo reservation in a remote location?
Pioneer.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Public service.
Mm-hmm. Yep, nailing it.
Selfless.
Yep. I may not necessarily be any of these things, but it's an experience that actually communicates that, whether you like it or not. It makes me sound fearless and adventurous. It communicates that I'm able to step into an environment that is completely unfamiliar and thrive. Now, for all they know, I sat in the corner and cried for years, which is not true, but I want them to think of me. I like that word pioneer. I want them to think of me as somebody who can pick it up and run. And so that's one of my leading stories. So what skills do I want them to know I have? So saying that I taught and lived on the Navajo reservation communicates volumes about my character. But now I want to get into the work that I did, because it's so much more than that. And because it was a cultural experience, one of the things that I worked on there was we took the Arizona State standardized tests and we rewrote the assessments to remove cultural bias. And then that is what we administered as a standardized test to our community, because their tests were very white middle class centric, and our kids were neither of those things. So why would that be an experience? I'm a teacher, so why would I want them to know that I understand standardized testing, that I've rewritten standardized testing? And I mean, I answered the question already, because I want them to understand that I'm sensitive to cultural biases. This is, for me, a hot topic. And when I'm looking for jobs, I'm always looking at schools or environments where cultural sensitivity and cultural awareness is baked into what they're doing. So I'm gonna, again, leading with this story. Are you connecting these dots with me?
Yep.
I hope so. And again, it's real simple. I'm not telling them this I'm not getting into the weeds and telling them about every assessment. I'm just letting them know that this is in my wheelhouse. And then an example, because now's the storytelling part. So, I mean, this is the dry version of it. We designed and tested performance-based assessment that aligned with state standards, aimed to neutralize cultural bias so that our students could demonstrate competencies in areas of math and literacy. If someone said that to me in an interview, I'm telling you, I think I would fall asleep on the spot. That is just, whew, that is a bore. But what I would tell them is that we had this math story problem that was in the standardized test. That was your basic math story problem. Remember story problems when we were in school? They're the bane of everyone's existence. You know, Tommy is catching a train and the train leaves at 3:15 and it takes 15 minutes to get to his grandmother's house. And if his grandmother has COVID and she needs a blueberry muffin, how long will it take Tommy to get there? And you get to the end of the story and you're like, what? So what we did was we extracted the actual math basis from the question and rewrote it using cultural references. So there was a geometry question and we rewrote it as a Navajo rug, and they had to fill in the pieces of the rug. It was the same skills, the completion of that story problem. Successful completion of the story problem would communicate the same skills and knowledge that it would have on the original, but we replaced it with cultural references that were familiar to them so that there was no impediment to access. So that's my story. That would be one of my go-tos. I would probably polish up that story a little bit, but that's one of the stories that I always tell. So what I want you to do is grab a pencil and a piece of paper or on your computer or however you like to write. And I want you to come up with one of your stories, and you're going to use this template. What experience do you want to highlight from your resume or from your life? What skill associated with that experience do you want to attach? And then what is a very short, pithy, but engaging and somewhat surprising story that they'll remember that illustrates, and this is what I want to do for you if you hire me. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to come up with a story, and hopefully someone's willing to share. Go.
We're allowed to ask questions, right?
Oh, please do. Just setting my timer. How are we doing?
Everybody's too deep in the process to interrupt it with conversation.
That's a beautiful thing. Keep on. You have 2 more minutes, and of course it doesn't need to be done or even ready to share. It's all your pace. right, one more minute. All right, I'm going to stop everyone there. I turned off my screen so that I could see you. I can't see you when I'm presenting. First of all, how did that feel for you? Did that feel any different than how you typically prepare for an interview? No, yes.
Similar. I mean, everybody has their story.
Right. Yeah, it should feel somewhat familiar, somewhat adjacent to how you prep yourself. It should feel a little more intentional and hopefully encourages you to be a little more engaging as far as adding a little color, little connective tissue to how you do it. Anyone out there willing to share?
I can, oh, Martha,
Hi.
take it away, Martha.
Hi, my name is Marta.
Oh, nice to see you, Martha.
Nice to see you, everyone. Maybe I can talk about my last experience. The only one experience I have here in United States. I was volunteer in Bloomfield Library with a program with ESL classes. I was volunteer there. And what experience that I want to highlight for my resume, my volunteer service here. My skills, maybe I would like I want to know that I have is, I like to help people that need some help like me when I came here. And I am a strategic person to give them some advices. That now was my role, but I try to help with many information. You can do this, or you can study, or you can go to the college, or you can do this, like an advisor, but no, I'm not advisor, but I like to help people that need some help with more information about these programs. It's more like that, the service with the students and community.
That's lovely. So do you have a story? So if I asked you in an interview, tell me about a time when you had to help someone. Do you have a story that you could tell us?
Okay. One of that experience was with my tutors. They want to learn more Spanish, and I was helping them with that, maybe in the classroom. I don't know. I have to make a story about that.
That would be perfect because it makes you sound collaborative. It shows leadership. It makes you sound like a peer. It's nice to be a student in a classroom, but you're showing that you're an adult student in that classroom, a professional adult. That would be a perfect story.
Okay. It was a great experience here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a story, anything they want to share? You really don't have to, that's fine.
I do.
Go.
Okay, what I wanted to share was at one point in my career, I had been a compliance administrator. And what that entailed was working with companies, basically auditing inside to make sure that there is a segregation of labor so that there is no fraud in the organization. This was like after Enron and all that. And what I want to highlight with that was at that point, my ability to work with all levels of management, because this was something most people did not want to do. This was not part of their normal job function. It was a waste of time. So I had to convince them, yes, this is important. And this entailed going from the union workers to every department within the company, finance, marketing, human resources, what have you, and went all the way to the top to me having to report the findings to the board of directors. So I had to be able to have everybody get on board. And as a quick example, I had one department that was consistently failing. And I had to bring the findings to the department head. And unsurprisingly, the head of the department was very defensive because you're pointing out your workers are not doing such and such, and you're failing. And the way I presented it was, look, I'm not here to point out somebody's mistakes. This is something that we all need to do to be compliant. So what I would like to do is find a way that I can help you so we can achieve that goal together.
Brilliant.
And he immediately became more receptive. And then it was like, oh, it's not like she's trying to find out what I'm doing wrong. So it completely turned the whole scene around.
That's such a good story, Irene, because it demonstrates so many skills and so many competencies. Is that a story that you typically tell when you're in an interview or in a work situation? Because it's good.
I have in the past, yes, because I think it was a perfect example that illustrates skills. Well, it's a customer service skill because you have your internal customer service as well as external. So, you know, it's not just people that you deal with on the outside, but it's people that you need to work with on an everyday level.
Right. Like, what is the experience that somebody has when they work with you? And that was what you just demonstrated. And that's so huge, that worker experience.
Right.
So,
it was taking a situation that everybody viewed as very negative and trying to turn it into something positive. And I mean, didn't change the fact that people still hated doing it, but I think it made a big difference with them realizing that you're not doing this to try to trip us up and find out what we're doing wrong. But I would offer also, which was important, would be to offer how you can improve it. Okay, it failed. However, in the future, we can do this or we can do that. And, you know, just to ensure that there would be a positive outcome.
right. And then that mantra in our heads, and this is what I can do for you.
Right.
Basically, I can bring you a painless, shame-free process that actually will result in results. That
right.
will
And
actually
it would make the board of directors happy, which is the
Yeah.
most important thing.
right. And people didn't walk away from it being embarrassed, and because that doesn't get anyone anywhere. So that's great. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keep that one. Anyone else have a story that they want to share, that they want to workshop with us? I'm going to go back to my screen. All right. So thank you, volunteers. I always say thank you. The problem here is, and it's not a problem, but the challenge is not coming up with your 3 stories. but figuring out a way to tell your 3 stories regardless of what question they are asking you. So here are common interview questions that I got from Jewish Vocational Services. Things like, tell me a little about yourself. Tell me about a time you made a mistake in the lessons you learned. People love those questions. Tell me about a time that you had to have a difficult conversation at work. So someone asked me about personal stories. I was asked that question in an interview, and I had just come off of having a situation at home where one of the little girls in our neighborhood punched my son in the face. And I had to call her mom and be like, hey, Chelsea just punched my kid in the face. And so I was telling this potential boss just what that conversation was like and how I did that in a way that was like, I love your kid, you love my kid. Let's just make sure that everyone's okay and safe. So it was one of those personal stories that actually answered the question. How do you handle an irate customer or coworker? Tell about an accomplishment. You want to always include why you're proud of it. Tell me about a time when you improved a process at your job. Tell me about a collaborative project you worked on. What motivates you? So I'm going to go back to Martha's story. And let's say they ask you, tell me about a time when you improved a process at your job. And this story about you working with your English tutors to help them learn to speak English, we're going to figure out how to pivot, because that's our next thing. You're going to learn how to pivot. So if they said, tell me about a time you improved a process at your job, you could say, well, it wasn't necessarily at my job, but when I was working with Berlitz, a couple of the tutors expressed an interest in learning Spanish. So what we ended up doing with our time is we did an exchange. We bartered language lessons, and I actually improved my English significantly while trying to help them learn Spanish, because I had to go back and forth and teach what I knew and use what they were teaching me. So it's a personal story, but it talks about a professional skill. How do I collaborate? How do I leverage what I have? How do I see an opportunity and work it in? How do I handle an irate customer or coworker? Irene's story is perfect for that. So, I like to avoid getting to that point. I think that if I'm proactive, that I can avoid having an irate customer or coworker. Here's an example. I had to go in and talk about blah, 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 blah. There was a failing department, and I had the head of the department was clearly defensive and feeling put on the spot. So what I did instead was presented it in this way. So you could always pivot to those questions, have your 3 stories in your back pocket, and just turn it to what you want them to talk about. So
Hey,
now
Laura,
it's your, yes.
to go back to that prior slide, what is your thoughts around tell me about yourself? Because there's all varieties of people suggesting this, that, and the other. What's your opinion? Because you could tell the story of your life, or you can tell them what happened on Monday. What's your thought on that topic or that question?
I think it all ties back together. I'm going in with my 3 stories. I'm going to tell one of my stories there. I'm going to say I'm up for anything, and I'm ready for the challenge. I cut my teeth as an educator working on the Navajo reservation. basically, and this was before the internet, I sat with a phone book in my public library and I cold called every superintendent on the Navajo reservation, was offered a job in a community that I had never seen, packed my suitcase 2 weeks later, landed in Albuquerque, took a cab to a car dealership, bought a car, and drove to the reservation. That's what I do. So constantly pivoting back to my stories.
Nothing connected to your career. So,
Well, that is my career. That's one of my
well,
teaching.
yeah. Yeah,
Whatever those 3 stories are, I'm constantly bringing it to that. Constantly going back to my 3 stories. That way you're prepared. So if one of your stories is
Thanks.
that you were, you were on a leadership team that evaluated competencies, and this was however you want to do it, but that would be to tell a little bit about yourself. Here's what you should know about me. I dig right in. And then, be really overt about it. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? No. All right. So this is a little bit of what we were just doing. What story do you want to develop? Choose 2 or 3 interview questions that would smoothly fit your story. And then ask yourself, what are they really asking? How do I show the skills that they're looking for? And we could brainstorm. So let's look at these questions and decide, what are they really asking? So starting with, tell me a little bit about yourself. What are they really asking you? Do they really want to know your life story? Do they want to know what you had for breakfast? Because my answer is Cheerios always. What are they asking when they say, tell me a little about yourself?
I'd like to know how you think of yourself, and what's important to you.
Yeah, they're gauging your self-esteem. They're gauging your sense of self. It's a softball question. That is a question that you can answer however you want. So what are they asking really? They want to see how you're going to answer that question. If I'm asking that in an interview, I'm very curious about about your comportment, how you represent yourself, given an open-ended, tell me about yourself. It's a very, for some people, that can make or break where you're at. Keep it tight. When they ask, tell about a mistake and the lessons you learned, what do they want to know?
How you managed the mistake.
Yeah. How do you
Be
manage
sincere.
failure? Yeah. Do you have sort of a honest integrity about you? Are you able to look at yourself with a little bit of honesty? And how do you handle failure? And don't get into it. Don't well, I was on the job and I set the copier on fire, and no, they don't want to know that you completely burnt the office down. Keep it tight.
Laura, does the elevator speech is synonymous with tell me about yourself?
I think that you can use that softball question however you want. The elevator speech is a really good, it could totally fit in there. I mean, if they haven't asked you yet, then yeah, plug it in right there, especially if you like your elevator speech. For sure. I'm still working on mine, to be perfectly honest.
But the idea in this question is talk about jobs, right? Not personal life.
Right. But not all of us have relevant job experience. We can get into anything, but you're right. Number two, they're asking you professional. They don't want to know about your ex-husband. Although that could be the whole interview right there. You want me to tell you about a mistake? Well, let me tell you. So they're like Martha said, or I think that was Martha said, they're not asking like, tell me about the mistakes you've made in your life and why you're here. They really want to know how you handle failure and how you regard yourself. How about tell me about a time you had a difficult conversation at work? That's right to Irene's story.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to add to that particular story with it being a difficult conversation with the manager. And one of the things that wound up coming up as a result of that was that the employee whose area kept failing had confessed to me that he really did not understand the computer system that he had to deal with. And doesn't matter if it was management's fault because they never showed him when he was coming in. Bottom line is you're going to keep failing. And I had said in a diplomatic way to his manager as part of that conversation, well, he seems to be having some difficulty for one reason, for whatever reason. He expressed the concern that he's really not familiar with what he needs to do. And I would be more than willing to sit down with him and show him how to do it. And
not only did you identify the problem, but you got a colleague to admit the problem and you offered the solution.
right.
Boom.
And kind of diffuse the situation at the same time, because his immediate manager, his first thing is, I'm going to have my employees back. So he came in with a defensive kind of demeanor. And in this case, it was, he understood the point that what we were doing was actually related to the SEC. So it was important in that respect. But it wasn't a, you're here to finger point at me. It was like, oh, okay, so once we do this, then everything will work out. We see a light at the end of the tunnel and we're doing this together. It's not like you're trying to tell me you're doing this wrong. You're trying to show me, I was approaching him, let me show you how I can help you so you can be successful.
Right. Look at what I found out for you and how
Right.
how we could fix this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everyone wants a story like that, a work story like that, where there was a potentially volatile or explosive train wreck of a situation that because of how I handled it, because of my stellar management and communication skills, it ended up being a win-win-win.
Right.
You
Wish they could all be like that.
Right. I mean, you can even make up a story. It's not like they know, they're not going to check. But
Right.
you having a story like that in your pocket, good to go, is gold. That is interview gold right there. We talked about handling an irate customer. That's very much the one that we were just looking at. An accomplishment. You should always have an answer to this question. And regardless of what question they ask you, tell me about a time that you had a difficult conversation. I'm going to twist that to talk about an accomplishment. Tell me how you handle an irate customer. Oh, that's going to be my accomplishment question, my thing. You're always trying to figure out, how can I shift? How do I pivot? A time when you improved a process at your job, collaborative project you worked on. These are all, how can you help us? And what motivates you? That is quite the question. And I've been asked that in interviews too. Have any of you been asked that in an interview? What motivates you? That is a rough one. So you understand all this. So now let's talk about pivoting. This is my favorite thing because this is how you control the job interview. This is your job interview. The third point here, remember, they are already interested in you. They've already called you in for an interview. They want you to be the one. They do not want to interview people for the next 3 months. They want to hire you. So now your job is to convince them that you are the one they're looking for. They're already on the platter. You just got to serve them up.
I'm doing okay. How about you?
So you're going to be connecting these dots, answering the question with a summary statement about your story and how it relates to the job for which you're interviewing. So if the question is, how do you handle an irate customer or coworker? I'm going to keep going back to Irene's story. You're going to talk about how you diffused and even were able to extract and identify a problem, create a solution, and move on. And you're going to connect those dots. So it's not just how did I handle an irate coworker, but this is how I solve problems. This is how I approach my colleagues. This is how I approach conflict. You're going to connect those dots for them. Any questions about pivoting? And then that's it. That brings us to an hour. We have 8 minutes for comments, questions, and concerns.
How do you keep your story short? So it's still, people still want to hear it.
That's the challenge. It's all about preparation. That's why you want to be prepared. You need to be prepared. Practice them, tell them over and over and over again. You want to sound extemporaneous. You don't want to sound canned, but you want these to be canned.
Great. I'm going to turn off the recording now in case anyone wants to ask a question they don't want recorded. So as soon as I figure out how to do that, here we go. Hold on. There we go.